Our top story tonight, the U.S. strikes multiple ISIS targets in Syria. The strikes happened as U.S. representatives met with Syria's president. President Trump says the U.S. stands ready to help in Iran's pursuit of freedom. This comes after Iranians continue their protests against the regime. Demonstrators in the U.S. tell us what this means to them. President Trump has big plans for this upcoming July 4th. It's the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding. A Navy SEAL veteran joins us to discuss why the celebration is so important. In the NFL, the playoffs are underway, but who has what it takes to make a Super Bowl run? NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And Shen Yun Performing Arts began its UK tour this week. The Lord Mayor of Oxford tells NTD what struck her about the performance.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Arlene Richards. U.S. forces struck multiple ISIS targets across Syria this afternoon. The strikes were in response to the deadly ISIS attack on U.S. and Syrian soldiers last month. The attack resulted in the deaths of 2 American soldiers and 1 civilian interpreter. U.S. Central Command called the strikes part of an effort to root out Islamic terrorism in the region. They came on the same day as the U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, Tom Barak, was meeting with the country's president. Today on social media, Barak urged Syria's neighbors to support President Trump's vision for Syria's historic transition into a unified and sovereign nation. Mass protests in Iran are showing no sign of slowing down today. On Truth Social, President Trump said Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. He said the U.S. stands ready to help. The protests also have supporters here in New York City. And Iran Freedom Rally took place Friday at Washington Square Park in Manhattan. Here's what they had to say.
I want them to have basic human rights, something that we take for granted here. That's my hopes for Iran. And I want to go back. And I want to step foot back into my native country again. And I want my dad to see a free Iran. So that's my hopes.
I feel Maduro, it was definitely like an American victory, but I definitely feel like what happened with Maduro really like translated to hope for the people of Iran. To say, hey, you know, like Trump does not play games, he does not mess around, and that he is with the protesters of Iran, unlike the previous administrations who kind of like just ignored it and just did their own thing. But Trump is definitely, like I said, more involved with the people of Iran, and he said, like, if the Islamic regime and the Ayatollah mess around, he will handle business and he will take care of it, which I strongly have faith in him, because like I've seen what he did back June, you know, when he struck the nuclear sites and when he was always like applying the maximum pressure to Iran.
Millions of people have came out on the streets across Iran. It's so uncontrollable, and they have outnumbered the security forces so much that the government decided to shut down the internet. Also considering the threat that President Trump made, they have shut down the internet. They have cut off the landlines. Just think about that. People are not able to call their loved ones, not only internet. So people are sitting in complete blackouts so that the government can start their killing spree in complete silence while the world is not watching. So it is very important for us right now to be the voice of our people who don't have a voice right now.
Iran's authorities signaled today they could intensify their crackdown on the anti-government demonstrations. The Revolutionary Guards are blaming the protests on terrorists and have vowed to safeguard the governing system. Demonstrations started last month in response to soaring inflation, but have expanded into challenges against the government. The exiled Crown Prince of Iran has emerged as a prominent voice in the opposition. He's now calling for a revolt to topple the Islamic regime. Mississippi authorities have charged a 24-year-old man with murder after 6 people, including a child, were killed in a series of shootings. The Clay County Sheriff said the victims, 4 family members related to the suspect, and 2 other adults were shot at 3 separate locations late Friday. The youngest victim, a 7-year-old, was a cousin of the suspect. The suspect has been charged with first-degree murder that could be upgraded to capital murder. Today, anti-ICE protests continue in Minnesota, with many others reportedly planned across the country this weekend in response to the death of 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. Good accelerated her car toward a federal agent, a move federal authorities say was an attempt to run over him, prompting the agent to open fire. Thousands of people marched in Minneapolis today. The gathering was one of many protests planned in towns and cities across the nation this weekend. Some of these events are being dubbed ICE Out for Good Weekend of Action by protest organizer Indivisible. Last night in Minneapolis, police detained 30 protesters after an unlawful assembly was declared. Protesters targeted a series of hotels where they suspected immigration agents were staying. Police say demonstrators forced themselves into the Hilton Canopy Hotel, while others caused $6,000 in damage to the windows and walls of the Depot Renaissance Hotel. The protesters who were detained were cited and later released. From a dramatic capture of a dictator and a massive trade deficit drop to revamped health guidelines focused on natural foods, this week saw major changes from the Trump administration. NTD's Daniel Monahan has your White House week in review.
In a daring overnight operation last weekend, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife were taken into custody to face charges in the United States.
The bravery was incredible. Lindsay, they got off the helicopter and the bullets were flying all over the place.
Maduro was flown to New York, later passing the Statue of Liberty, and arraigned in a federal court on Monday, where he pleaded not guilty. President Trump addressed questions about leadership in Venezuela following Maduro's capture.
And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It means we're in charge.
Massive protests took place all week in Iran, with demonstrators marching through Iran's capital and other major cities. President Trump has repeatedly threatened Tehran if it kills protesters.
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
President Trump proposed increasing the Pentagon budget by 66% to $1.5 trillion by 2027, saying it would deliver what he calls America's dream military, commenting on Fox News.
We need it because there are some real threats out there.
The trade deficit shrank to around $29 billion in October, the narrowest gap since June 2009, and a 39% decrease from September. CNBC called the numbers unreal.
We haven't been that small in a long time. I don't have enough records here to go back that far.
Vice President J.D. Vance called on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to step down, as the state has been racked by a massive alleged fraud scandal.
I think Tim Walz should resign because it's very clear either that he knew about the fraud in Minneapolis, he knew about the welfare fraud, or at the very least he looked the other way.
Minnesota was also the site of an ICE officer-involved shooting, where an officer shot as a car sped toward him, killing the driver. Governor Walz criticized federal enforcement tactics.
There is no verifiable evidence that any of this is making America safer.
The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day.
HHS announced new guidelines for a healthy diet.
Real food, protein, dairy, fruit and vegetables, and then grains, whole grains. That's what America should be eating, and that is what the science says.
We are going to finally address the root causes of our broken healthcare system: insulin resistance and general body inflammation, advanced by the protein-poor, micronutrient-poor, ultra-processed, refined carbohydrate diet that kids are addicted to today.
The Trump administration announced the U.S. will exit 66 international organizations and agreements, including 31 tied to the United Nations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said many were dominated by progressive ideology and detached from national interests. President Trump again described Greenland as vital to U.S. national security.
Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place.
President Trump also moved to ban institutional investors from purchasing single-family homes, a policy aimed at lowering housing costs. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The Trump administration's action in Venezuela is stirring up a heated debate on Capitol Hill. Defense officials briefed lawmakers this week, and Democrats forced a vote to limit further U.S. military action in the country. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the Capitol Hill roundup.
Republicans returned to Capitol Hill this week, quick to defend the Trump administration's removal of communist dictator Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela.
Under President Trump, the United States will no longer allow criminal regimes to profit from wreaking havoc and destruction on our country.
The people in Miami, the people of the area that I represent, are very happy that Nicolas Maduro is out of the way. And now, hopefully, it paves the way for a free and democratic Venezuela.
Though most Democrats critical of the administration's choice to take military action without congressional approval. On Thursday, Democrats and 5 Republicans advanced a resolution to curtail President Trump's authority to order further military action on Venezuela.
And then a debate, finally, after months, about this military operation.
Following a classified briefing from defense and justice officials, some lawmakers raised concerns about what they described as a lack of clarity on the plans ahead.
There are a lot of questions from both Democrats and Republicans about what comes next, what the timeline is.
That's what you always say when it's the other party. The bottom line is we've gone into great detail with them about the planning. We've described it to him.
Senator John Fetterman once again breaking with the general Democrat messaging, praising Trump's actions after the U.S. military seized sanctioned oil tankers.
I love it. I love it. Finally standing up and pushing back on Russia.
As for other key congressional action, House lawmakers held the first public hearing to expose a multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme taking place in Minnesota.
And Minnesota's Democrat leadership have either been asleep at the wheel or complicit in these crimes.
One state lawmaker revealed that people who tried to report the fraud faced retaliation.
Threats of being fired with cause, which means you do not get unemployment insurance in the state of Minnesota, being blacklisted from all state agencies.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has repeatedly defended his handling of the massive fraud, but following national scrutiny, he decided to drop his re-election campaign to serve for a third term. Democrat Senator Amy Klobuchar is now eyeing the spot. In other news, lawmakers are grieving the passing of late Congressman Doug LaMalfa. The longtime Republican from Northern California died on Tuesday. Lawmakers from both parties offered condolences.
It really shook us. Doug was a great man. He really was truly a great man. He's a lifelong resident of Northern California and deeply loved the people he represented. He was a fierce fighter, as you've heard.
Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries, in a statement, wrote, "It was an honor to witness firsthand his passion and personal resolve for more than a decade." President Trump dedicated his speech to the entire Republican caucus to late Congressman LaMalfa.
I was really saddened by his passing and was thinking about not even doing the speech in his honor. But then I decided that I have to do it in his honor. I'll do it in his honor because he would have wanted it that way. He would have wanted it that way.
California will need to hold a special election to replace LaMalfa in the coming weeks. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Coming up, a discussion on our nation's 250th anniversary this year. Why is it so significant? A U.S. Navy SEAL veteran joins us after the break. One of the last things President Trump did before the new year was to launch Freedom 250, a task force created to carry out events to celebrate America's 250th anniversary. Now, it's working in conjunction with America 250, a congressional committee. These patriotic events are meant to serve as a reminder to Americans of our nation's heritage and the remarkable story of American independence. So joining me to discuss the significance of America's 250th anniversary is Mike Seriali, a U.S. Navy SEAL veteran and the Chief Talent Officer for Overwatch Mission Critical. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Thanks, Arlene.
Now, President Trump has a number of big events planned this year, like a prayer gathering at the National Mall on May 17th and the Great American State Fair starting on June 25th. So what will this 250th anniversary mean for the nation?
I think it comes at an interesting time, and you've got to go back to the founding fathers who took all the risk alongside all the patriots, the colonials who fought against tyranny. You know, if they were here today, I think they would be in awe and tears that we've made it this far, that we unlocked, human potential and innovation to a rate that humanity has never seen, as Reagan once said. But we can't sugarcoat the state of divisiveness within our nation right now, and I think this gives us an opportunity to reinforce the ideals and the values under which this country was founded, and see if we can't find some commonality to get back to what the true intent of our founding fathers was. And I think through a year of celebrations, not just one celebration on July 4th, but a year of celebration and remembrance for the million-plus Americans who've laid down their lives for our freedom. Hopefully, people that have never seen just horror like that combat, the Civil War, World War II, the War for Independence, hopefully they can find some way to understand the sacrifice that it took to get here today. And I think for a lot of Americans, that's a very difficult task to ask.
Now, I just want to follow up on that. You talk about the founding fathers and that they would be in tears today if they saw, what we're doing today. And when we think of July 4th, many people may associate it with fireworks and eating hot dogs. But talk about how important it is for all Americans to know and understand our founding principles and what those values hold and mean for us.
Well, hey, the fireworks and hot dogs, it's not a bad way to celebrate. It puts a bow on what is just a truly unique day. But we founded this nation, our founding fathers, with Judeo-Christian values. And, the principles of free speech and the right to bear arms. And we've come to a point where we have such polar opposites in our beliefs. The left has a vision, the right has a vision. It's not for me to say which one is right or which one is wrong. I know where I believe, and it falls within the conservative camp. But let's take the border issue and what happened in Minnesota recently. We are a sovereign nation. And sovereignty is not evil. It is survival for what we believe in and what some Americans, not all, are willing to die for. And you can't have sovereignty without borders. You can't have borders without enforcement. And you can't have enforcement without a few good Americans who are willing to just uphold the law. And, I don't expect for a lot of Americans to understand that. And to give you a point, Arlene, when the War for Independence started, the colonists never received more than 45% support from those that lived in the colonies to stand up for what is right and fight against the British. That shows that the minority always carries the load for the majority. But we've got to remember, that this was founded on the Constitution, which sets the framework for us to live, to govern. And some people just want to trample right over it. And so, again, the minority will stand for what is right. And they have usually almost all times been victorious in what is, I say, a just fight.
Now, you talk about free speech and standing up for what is right. And President Trump's goal has always been to make America great again. And he's referring to a time when there was a lot of respect and admiration for American freedom, as you talk about, and prosperity. But with the passage of time, many have lost that respect. So could the president's celebrations somehow reignite our faith and hope for this country and inspire people to support his vision?
I would love to be the optimist here and say, yes, I believe that the potential of these celebrations of our 250th can convince 50% of our country. But the truth is no. You look at what President Trump has done. He's trying to return, not only culturally to the values we once had, but he's actually reestablishing what I believe is just across the world, moral clarity. I think the hatred for President Trump overrides moral clarity for the left. That's my opinion. And I'll give you an example. There are those that in the left was screaming for the removal of Maduro. President Trump does what they were screaming for a year ago, and now they want to cry constitutional law. President Trump didn't add to the instability of the Western Hemisphere. He removed the source of it when he removed Maduro from power. I think we lack the moral clarity. Moral clarity requires hard, uncomfortable decisions for what is right, not only for America, the Western Hemisphere, but the world. And his actions in the Western Hemisphere, removing Russia and China from our doorstep, who are fighting through asymmetric means that have a long-term view on overtaking America, he just cut them off at the knees. So, that was a bold and necessary decision. And again, half of the country will not respect that. And so it is that divisiveness, and I don't have the right answer to what brings us together. And maybe the right question is it even possible to come back together? But at the end of the day, to me, and someone who served 20 years alongside some of the best men and women I've ever met, and just watching selfless valor for something they believe in, this country, I have a different perspective than most Americans who have never traveled the world or seen a third world country, which is 85% of the world.
Now, you talk about divisiveness today and a lack of moral clarity, but our founders seriously contemplated what this new nation's values should be, and they leaned on God for moral inspiration. But we're losing this, as you say, we're losing those values to things like anti-American thought, for example, critical race theory. And these all bring to mind the Marxist ideologies that we've seen in other countries like communist China. So how important do you think it is to celebrate our nation and values to counter these anti-American ideologies?
Just look to the world and study history. If you want a current modern event, look at Venezuela, a people that were ruled by a socialistic dictator who oppressed his people, who murdered his people, who imprisoned his people. And once Maduro was removed, what did they do? They sang, they danced, they cried in the streets, finally a free people. That's what America stands for. And so socialism and Marxism or communism will never have a place here. And we see what's going on with New York with the first socialist democratic mayor. That is an experiment, which I can tell you, I've seen this movie before, which will end badly. New York is worse off because of the situation they're in. So, it just takes a few brave people to stand against that. What I think a lot of Americans miss is that patriotism. And if you want to be extreme, call it nationalism, for the ideals that we believe in, is the social glue that held this country together for 250 years. And we are seeing it eroded. And you know what? I think you brought up critical race theory. We brought up these woke DEI policies. They proved ineffective. They proved just to be a utter and abysmal disaster. And I do think that the pendulum is starting to swing back the other way, that people were done with it. They were just fed up with it. And if people want to protest ICE, if they want to try to hit ICE members with their, ICE officers or agents with their car, we're just going to follow the law, the letter of the law. And ultimately we will prevail, but we've got to be patient. We've got to demonstrate restraint and just stand by the values you live in. And usually when you do that, you persevere and we come out stronger.
Now, we know President Trump is planning some very big events this year. It started on New Year's Day with the celebration at the National Mall. But after these celebrations are over, what will the president need to do to keep the momentum going in this goal of his to make America great again?
Not listen to those that support anti-American values. Continue to show the moral clarity and the moral courage to do what he thinks is right, to I would say reunify this country, but to put this country in a better place than it was, to close off our borders, with what he's done in Venezuela, to reset the global chessboard, to reach out to our allies and hold them accountable as he does, as he has with NATO. I think he's done a fabulous job. Again, very few are going to give him credit. He's ended close to 10 wars. He is a president that believes in peace, but he is willing to do what is necessary, the hard decisions, when someone is a threat to our sovereignty and our people, and he's done just that. So, I can only applaud him while others will decry him, and that's fine. Leadership is a very difficult thing. It's not a popularity contest. It's doing what is right for the organization. And in his case, what is right for the country and what is right for the world, because usually what is right for America brings peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. But this sense of appeasement that we've had for arguably the last decade, of trying to appease our foreign adversaries or our enemies or appease allies without holding them accountable, it has proved ineffective. And Arlene, I'll say this, a lot of companies are fearful of upsetting the woke left. In our company, Overwatch Mission Critical, the first thing we do every morning is hold a daily muster at 9 a.m. And the first thing we do during that daily muster is we play the national anthem to remember, to rally around one thing that unites us. And we may be a company that's only 300 people, but we feel that unity that, we may be in the private sector and I'm not in the military anymore, but we have a goal, and that is to strengthen the U.S. economy, which arms our military with the budget, the resources that they need to protect freedom across the world. And it's funny, we've had certain people object to doing that. And guess what? We made it optional, not mandatory. We cannot, and we should not try to pull people back in to the fold who just absolutely see something or have ideals that are anti-American. Let them do their thing. But if we can pull ones and twos here from here and there, and remind them of the sacrifices that people had to make, why the ideals have worked for 250 years, maybe there's a chance that we can slowly turn this country in the right direction. And I think President Trump is doing that.
Well, with what President Trump has planned, I'm sure so many Americans are going to be very inspired by it. Mike Serial, U.S. Navy SEAL veteran, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up in the NFL, the playoffs are underway, but who has what it takes to make a Super Bowl run? NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And a neurologist explains why the onset of Alzheimer's isn't random or inevitable, and what steps we can take right now to lower its risk after the break. For your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, good to see you as always.
Hey, good to see you, Arlene.
And now on this Saturday, we have a lot of college sports going on, but I want to get to the NFL because I know the playoffs are in progress right now. We've got the Rams playing the Panthers in North Carolina. How's that going?
Yeah, Rams are up 17-14 right now at the break. So Carolina, kind of hanging tough. I mean, Rams are heavy favorites in this one. They're 10-point favorites here in this game. Carolina is the only team in the playoffs with a losing record. Of course, it was still the best record in the division, but it was still 8-9 anyway. This is the first of two games today. The second game, 8 p.m. Eastern time, Bears host the Packers in a division rivalry game. That should be a good one. Then tomorrow, we've got a triple header. Starts at 1 p.m. Bills playing at the Jaguar. Now, Buffalo is one of those teams that's been foiled by the Chiefs in seasons past, and the Chiefs have been in their season 4 times in the last 5 years, but the Chiefs are out this season. Maybe they make a run without them. Then at 4:30, the second game, 49ers play the Eagles. No, actually, San Francisco has had their season ended in the Super Bowl by the Chiefs twice in the last 6 years. Then at 8 o'clock, Patriots versus the Chargers. And then it ends Monday night when Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers face the Houston Texans in Pittsburgh. So 6 games here in wild card round weekend.
Now, speaking of Rodgers, he said last summer that he was pretty sure he would retire after this season. So is he sticking to that?
He hasn't said for sure. It certainly seems like he's changing his tune a little bit. Now, last week when he was asked about it, he said he'll have a lot of options when the season ends because, he's 42 years old. He's playing on a 1-year contract. He also said, though, he's enjoying his time in Pittsburgh and that the experience this year was much better than he was hoping. Now, obviously, it looks like he's had a much more enjoyable season than the previous 2 years with the Jets. 2023, he missed nearly the whole season with that torn Achilles tendon. Last year, the Jets were a disappointment, to say the least. They fired their head coach and the general manager during the season. Rodgers ended up taking a lot of the blame for the team's season as well. In Pittsburgh, though, he and head coach Mike Tomlin really look like they're getting along well. I mean, they won a division this year. Rodgers put up some pretty good numbers, especially for a 42-year-old. I would think if he comes back, the Steelers certainly would be his preferred destination. They have at least one more game together Monday night against the Texans. It's going to be tough, though. The Texans put on a good pass rush. It's very difficult for Rodgers to escape that. So I think it'll be a good game.
Okay, well, good for him at 42.
Yeah,
you know,
it's pretty amazing to do that.
Hanging in there. All right, so let's move to college football playoffs. Indiana knocks out Oregon last night. They are advancing to the championship game. What do you make of that?
Well, that is the last time I pick against Indiana for a while. You know, I'm surprised someone could beat Oregon by that amount, 56-22. I mean, the game was essentially over by halftime. It was 35-7 at the break. So Oregon
blowout.
It was a blowout. So Oregon, though, they finished with a 13-2 record, 0-2 against Indiana, 13-0 against everybody else. I mean, what Curt Cignetti, head coach of Indiana, has done in just 2 seasons, this is the greatest rebuilding job we have ever seen. I mean, I keep thinking they're going to run into the wall in these playoffs, but they keep winning. I mean, they beat Alabama in the previous round 38-3, and now they are 15-0 on the season. Last year they went 11-2. In the previous 120 years, they had never won more than 9 games in the season. I mean, they were the annual last place team, you know, in the Big Ten. They were the doormat. Anyway, now they are facing Miami for the national title a week from Monday night. That'll be played at the Orange Bowl, which is actually Miami's home stadium, go figure. So it won't be easy. Essentially a road game for the championship, but I'm going to pick Indiana for this one.
You're going to pick Indiana
I'm going to pick Indiana.
All right, well, I hope they win. So let's talk about college basketball now. We've got a number of teams playing today. Where do they stand so far?
Yeah, a lot of ranked teams in action today, 20 in all. Let's look at some scores here. We start with an upset in the Big 12. West Virginia beats number 22 Kansas, 86-75. Mountaineers went on unfortunately for Kansas, yeah. Mountaineers went on a 22-2 run in the second half to pull away. Meanwhile, number 4 UConn downs DePaul 72-60. Huskies now 16-1 in the season. And number 10 Nebraska continues their incredible start. They beat Indiana in Bloomington 83-77. Cornhuskers now 16-0. Let's look at some more scores here. 20th ranked Louisville beat Boston College 75-62. Meanwhile, in Gainesville, defending national champion Florida beat Tennessee, number 20 Tennessee 91-67. Finally, a major upset in the Big Ten. Wisconsin goes on the road, hands number 2 Michigan their first loss of the season, 91-88. Wolverines now 14-1 on the year. Let's look at some more scores. 7th-ranked Houston won 77-55 at Baylor. And in the SEC, number 11 Vanderbilt beat LSU 84-73. In the Big Ten again, number 5 Purdue beat Penn State 93-85. Boilermakers now 15-1. We got some more scores here still. 6th-ranked Duke beat number 24 SMU 82-75. Blue Devils now 15-1. 18th ranked Georgia won at South Carolina 75-70, and number 23 Virginia beat Stanford 70-55. We have a couple of games that just ended right now in the Big 12. Number 1 Arizona beat TCU 86-73. Number 3 Iowa State won at Oklahoma State 83-71, and we got a whole bunch of games going on tonight. 15th ranked Arkansas is playing at Auburn. We got number 14 Texas Tech, number 13 Alabama, and number 9 BYU. All are in action tonight, so you got all that, Arlene?
I think so, but I know you're going to be busy tonight as usual.
I know, NFL and college basketball. Yeah. It's going to be a busy night on the couch.
And
that's
pretty
for
exciting,
sure.
Though, right?
Pretty exciting.
Yeah. All right, Dave. Well, thanks so much for that report.
Thanks, Arlene.
Have fun tonight. Alzheimer's is a heartbreaking disease, one that can slowly erase a lifetime of memories, relationships, and identity, just as people hope to enjoy the rewards of their hard work. But what if the onset of the disease isn't random or inevitable? What if there are steps we can take right now to lower the risk? In this episode of Vital Signs, a neurologist and fellow of the American College of Nutrition joins host Brendan Fallon to explain what drives his brain disease and what people can do earlier in life to help prevent it.
the early changes of Alzheimer's begin 20 to 30 years prior to the executive function failure. When our blood sugar elevates, it tends to change our brain's immune system from being friend to being foe. The empowering part of that statement is the shift is under your care. You can control that.
My next guest is Dr. David Perlmutter, a board-certified neurologist. I'm going to be talking to him about the idea that Alzheimer's may be a type 3 diabetes, a metabolic disease, essentially. Dr. David Perlmutter, why don't you start by telling us about your qualification?
Well, Brandon, thank you, first of all, for having me. I am, as you mentioned, a board-certified neurologist. Neurology has always been my passion, but I'm also a fellow of the American College of Nutrition. I'm the only one with both of those designations. I'm a 6 times New York Times bestselling author. And my focus is really on neurodegenerative conditions in general. And you mentioned we were going to start off with Alzheimer's, and I think it's a very, very important topic that we should open up.
The first thing I'd like to ask you on that front, if someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, is it a foregone conclusion that they're going to be dead within 10 years, would you say?
Well, I think if we just look at what mainstream medicine has to offer these individuals, the answer is yes. Almost, will they be alive? Yeah, and what will that quality of life be like 10 years from now? It's hard to imagine what that's going to look like. But I will say, on the other hand, right now, as you and I have this conversation, there are some incredible advancements in the understanding of what is causing the brain to go bad in Alzheimer's disease. And why is that important? Because it's now giving us some incredibly important tools to really combat that problem. And I think, to be fair, my mission is not so much focused on treating patients who are down the slope of Alzheimer's decline, although that's what we do. It's also, and I think equally important, to focus on how to keep your brain healthy today and keep you from having to worry about what's my treatment going to be, rather make you the steward of your own brain's destiny.
If you come to a patient who has an Alzheimer's diagnosis, let's say they could go back 30, 40 years, what is the main things they should be doing at that point in their lives?
That's a fantastic question, because the reality is that the early changes of Alzheimer's, we'll call them the metabolic changes in the brain, begin 20 to 30 years prior to the memory failure, the executive function failure, what we call the clinical markers of the disease, where basically your brain isn't working right. So that's where we need to intervene. We need to intervene in people your age and make them recognize that lifestyle choices you are making right now are going to play out when you're my age. So, if you want to be cognitively intact, I'm 70, and have conversations like this, you better start doing the things at your age to rein in your metabolism, your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your insulin sensitivity, your body weight, your serum lipids, your blood fats, as it were. These things are critically important in terms of your metabolism, and Alzheimer's is fundamentally a manifestation of problems earlier in your life with your metabolism. The empowering part of that statement is you can control that.
What would you identify as the most compelling evidence that these metabolic factors are influencing Alzheimer's?
Well, for me, there's a lot of science out there that makes it very clear. The increased risk of developing Alzheimer's if you're type 2 diabetic is about 3.8-fold, for example. That means, you're more than triple at risk of getting Alzheimer's if you're a type 2 diabetic. And these, the incidence of diabetes is skyrocketing. Here in America, we have 40 million type 2 diabetics, meaning 40 million people whose risk for Alzheimer's is increased threefold. And they don't have to be type 2 diabetics. We have about 1/3 of our population pre-diabetic. That's worrisome, but even more worrisome is that 90% of those people don't know it. So they're on the continuum to become diabetic. They're on the continuum to increase their risk of Alzheimer's by about threefold. That's where we need to intervene. For me, if I'm thinking about all the literature, this is a little bit of an outsider for you. The most compelling thing that comes to my mind is an image, a picture. And what that picture shows, it's a special type of brain scan that looks at the brain's ability to use glucose, blood sugar, as a fuel, and shows significant issues with that early on, long before the clinical manifestation. So what I'm saying is that the brain's ability to use fuel appropriately is compromised decades before we begin becoming forgetful. And that's all about our metabolism.
So with insulin resistance being as I understand it, at the core of diabetes, well, first, Dr. Perlmutter, what is it that, in terms of diabetes, the phenomena of diabetes that is leading to the brain degeneration?
That's a wonderful question, and I'll tell you why. Because we've known about the statistic I just quoted about the threefold increased risk, but that was about as far as the conversation went. And so now you ask the question, okay, why is that? And I think that's a great place to go.
To see that full interview and others on how to optimize health, go to ept.ms/vital signs. Vital Signs offers general health information not intended as medical diagnosis or advice. Please consult your doctor before undertaking a new health regimen.
Coming up, reviving traditional culture live on stage. The Lord Mayor of Oxford tells NTD what struck her after watching Shen Yun performing arts. And a look at medieval towers in the nation of Georgia and what they mean to local residents when we return only on NTD. Audiences across the world have been impressed by the artistry of Shen Yun dancers and musicians. In England, Shen Yun Performing Arts took the stage this week for its first performance of the year in Oxford. Among audience members was the Lord Mayor of Oxford. NTD is a proud media sponsor of Shen Yun, covering audience reactions since 2006.
From flips and turns to gentle movements, Shen Yun Performing Arts has a mission to revive China's ancient civilization through dance and music. It's a rich culture that in recent times was almost lost under communist rule. Among the audience watching Shen Yun in Oxford's new theatre on January the 7th was the Lord Mayor of Oxford.
What a wonderful, sort of joyful, colourful, but incredibly artistic afternoon. One interesting bit was when all of the female dancers sort of lift up one leg and basically sort of kind of doing the splits, holding one leg directly upwards, and I felt the audience collectively go because that's just so dramatic to be able to do that.
According to the programme book, following the traditions of ancient China, Shen Yun artists believe that to perform something truly good and beautiful on stage, they have to cultivate their inner beauty. The Lord Mayor commented on how this came through in the joy and the synchronicity of the performers.
Every movement was in sync, everything they did together, even just, I was really noticing what they did with their hands. So every hand movement was beautifully precision, calculated, I could see, and moved together. So that sense that they were all acting as one came through very clearly, I think. And also the joy, I think they all really enjoyed doing it. You can see they're smiling and enjoying it. So clearly I'd imagine that they are all good friends and that they really think of themselves as a unit.
The dances are accompanied by a live orchestra that blends musical traditions from the East and West, combining ancient Chinese instruments with a full Western orchestra.
Lovely to hear the really different kind of instruments, the Chinese musical instruments that we're not used to hearing, but with the backdrop of the more traditional sort of Western orchestra, but picking out the melodies with the traditional Chinese instruments was very special, really interesting to hear.
The Lord Mayor said she enjoyed the universal messages in the performance.
It's not just an entertaining afternoon, it actually sends you away thinking, well, I think there are more good people in the world than bad. And that's a good thing.
NTD News, Oxford, UK.
Shen Yun concluded its performances in Oxford today and will continue its tour across the UK. And staying with cultural heritage, medieval towers in the nation of Georgia were originally built to protect the population from invasion. And today they've earned international recognition, but are falling apart. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
In the mountain landscape of the Caucasus, these defensive towers have survived for centuries. Mindia Charkseliani's family has lived in a local village here for hundreds of years. For him, the towers are an integral part of who he is.
It's part of our identity. This is how they lived. Our ancestors likely came here, settled, and began building. They lived alongside these towers, they struggled, and they developed. I don't know. It's their history. Their adventures are reflected in these towers. That's why we try so hard to preserve them.
The unique towers have now earned UNESCO status. Despite the protection, many residents like Chark Saliani worry about the future.
In recent years, for the past 4 or 5 years, the authorities have been funding the restoration of the towers. Unfortunately, the process is very slow because only small amounts of money are allocated each year. And besides the towers, we also have traditional Svan houses, the Machubi, that are damaged and need attention as well.
A neighboring village has around 200 towers still standing. Zoe at Chark Saliani's family runs a small museum inside a 12th century building.
It's damaged. It probably can't withstand the centuries on its own. The stones crumble naturally, but it needs care. It must be maintained in time. The government should help us. They promised us, and hopefully they will fulfill this promise.
One nearby tower belongs to Aka Kiviciani's family. It's one of the best preserved and offers breathtaking views over villages and the surrounding mountains.
It is known as a tourist destination, of course. We have quite a lot of visitors. However, all this is not enough, which is the current situation. The infrastructure needs more development, the arrangement of roads, access paths, and so on. And more tourists will come and more interest will arise.
Tourism in Georgia is on the rise, with tens of thousands of visitors traveling to this mountainous region every year. At the same time, residents like Chark Saliani say a surge in new construction threatens Georgia's medieval towers. He's pushing for what he calls a proper approach and a long-term, well-structured plan. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's the news for this evening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Arlene Richards. Good night.